โมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings to all. As you know, in Melbourne, we've come out of lockdown and visitors are returning to the monastery on a daily basis. Something I've noticed just because people are coming back to the monastery is the number of people coming to make merit for their relatives who've died, maybe in the last year or so, who were unable to come to the monastery, and how important it is for many Buddhists to make merit for the dead. Merit making, practically speaking, often involves coming to the monastery, making offerings, donations, food offerings, other kinds of offerings, and the monks chant, and people will at that time share the merit they're making, dedicate it to a particular loved one, especially if somebody has died recently. And they may offer robes on behalf of somebody who's died as part of a funeral service. But of course, the other side of it is when somebody we love dies, we experience grief, experience loss. So a lot of people are processing their loss, their grief, seeking advice on that. Maybe they've been stuck at home during lockdown. So there's almost, you could say, unfinished business in their hearts because somebody has died and they haven't yet quite come to terms with it. And that's what grief is, isn't it? The sense of loss, sadness. Perhaps this is why the Buddha encouraged us to recollect every day that separation from all our love and like is certain. As just as a teaching, as a daily reflection, he encouraged us just to think about that every day, that everything you love and like in this world will one day separate from you because of impermanence. Everything is impermanent, including ourselves, including our loved ones, everything. So the job you do, one day you will leave that for one reason or another, through age, retirement, or even death, or people you work with will leave, they will leave through age or retirement or just moving to another job, or even through death. The neighbors you live next to, eventually they will separate from you, perhaps through death. And of course, the people you are closest to, family, relatives, friends, eventually we separate from each other through death. So it's an integral part of our life, the fact that we all must face our own death and the death of our loved ones. So this is why the Buddha encouraged us to reflect on it every day. You might call it the practice of right effort. There's the 4 right efforts in Buddhism. One of them is the effort to prevent unwholesome states of mind that haven't yet arisen from arising. So preventative practice, recollecting the Dhamma, helps to bring our mind to contemplate, familiarize ourselves with the fact that there will be people we love, one day they won't be there. We'll separate, and we're going to have to face that truth. So you might as well prepare yourself by bringing it up mindfully, recollecting it as a form of meditation or contemplation in your daily life, so that your mind is little by little getting prepared for that truth. Because you can see, especially in the monastery, when people come and they are overwhelmed by grief sometimes, you see the results if people haven't prepared themselves, they haven't ever contemplated this. It's a shock, isn't it? It's a shock to the system when your loved one leaves you, whether it's parent, partner, a child, even our children sometimes die before we do. Or a good friend. Some of our friends are older than us, some are younger. It's a shock for many people, and that shock can paralyze them. The mind is just stuck with the sense of loss, with the sadness. Even people who work in a field of life who may encounter death quite naturally, so like a doctor or a nurse or funeral director or paramedic or somebody who actually comes across death quite often. As long as it's somebody they don't really know, then it may still be traumatic and a very emotional thing to have to deal with. But at the same time, there's not that sense of it really affecting us closely, maybe. But if it's our own family member or close friend, then there is. And these, a doctor who's maybe signed many death certificates and had to be with people close to death or even when they've died, they may feel fairly ordinary, may have a little bit of emotion, but not a lot. But then when it's their own family member, of course, there's the same grief, the shock, the sadness comes up. And because it's somebody we're close to. The only way to really deal with this is to contemplate what is death and what is separation and what is the nature of existence. And so the Buddha said, every day contemplate the fact that life is impermanent and you'll one day separate from everyone. So that your mind is already aware of that fact. Little by little, that insight, that wisdom is growing in you every day. And it leads on to many other understandings and insights, doesn't it? When you contemplate that separation is inevitable, then the time you have together becomes important. And you notice somebody was here today, they've lost a son, so it's somebody younger than them. Even if it's somebody quite young who unfortunately dies through accident or illness, there'll be many precious moments from the life of that person that you can remember. And that may be the starting point of dealing with grief and the suffering of separation and loss. even a small baby dies, if it happens. That baby will have already brought joy to the parents, to the family, even if only for a short period of time. That's what you have to look back to, the joy of life. And when we're caught up in separation from those that we love or the things we love, it's not just people, it's also situations, experiences, roles we've played, jobs we've done, things we've identified within our life. That separation always brings up this sense of personal loss. And the more we get stuck in that or attached to the feeling, the negative feeling, the unpleasant, painful feeling, and the sense of loss, the less we see the Dhamma, the less we see the truth of it. We get more caught up in our own suffering, and so we cry and we can't think straight and we feel very unpleasant inside maybe, and we can't eat, we can't sleep, can't function as normal. If you think about it, say at this time, if you're not experiencing that kind of grief or loss at this moment, then it's a good thing to do is to think about it and contemplate this. And what is that? Where is it coming from? It's really a more, attachment is coming from this sense of self that we build up through our life. And then the person we separate from, or the thing we separate from, we've identified with over and over again, maybe for a long period of time, often the people who die, we separate from are older people. So it may be for many, many years, maybe your whole life, you've been identifying with them, holding on to them, loving them and hating them, maybe together, but attaching to them. And so when they've gone, it's like it pulls something out from you. It feels literally like some part of you has been pulled away, taken away. But it's our own attachment that is challenged, isn't it? It's our own sense of loss. And if we're not very mindful and we've never contemplated this, then that's what we're overwhelmed by. So it's quite a self-centered experience, grief. My life is somehow lesser because this person has gone. They've left me. Sometimes it's anguish. They shouldn't have left me, or this shouldn't have happened. And we get angry, can't accept it. Then there's sadness, the fact that they've gone and we can't get them back. It's all coming from a very central view of self. But when we bring our mind more in line with Dhamma and reflect on the true nature of existence, and we do it regularly through our lives, then that sense of more self-centered view of things fades a bit the more you bring up the Dhamma through the practice, and you can see it's actually just the way things are. It's part of life, isn't it? So like today at the monastery, there's people here and we're talking about this. Everybody knows somebody who they've loved or liked, and then that person has gone through death. Generally people older than us, but sometimes younger. But everybody has that experience. There's no one in the world who sooner or later isn't touched by the loss of a loved one. It happens every day to people all over the place. And to us, each person, we all have our own experience, and we will have more of that experience. When you start thinking in this way, looking around, opening your eyes to the deeper truths of life, then that sense of taking it very personally and suffering with the loss starts to be reduced. And we can cope with it more when we realize it's just the way things are for human beings, animals, any being that's born must die. It's normal. That's the way things are. Much of Dhamma practice is based around this simple truth, the impermanence of life, the impermanent nature of this world, the things of the world. And we say one who sees the Dhamma is seeing impermanence. And they're bringing their mind, their thinking, their perspective on life in line with the truth. And one of the best ways to do that is just keep learning, educating yourself every day about this fact. This is why we practice meditation every day, reflect on the teachings every day. We do chanting, we go to events, retreats and monasteries, and listen to talks and so on. It's because we're in an ongoing situation of learning and educating ourselves to open up to the truth of life better than before, so that we'll suffer less. And that, you have to also stop and think about this. It's not like by accepting the impermanence and the fact that we will separate from everyone we love and like, accepting that fact doesn't diminish your love or the goodness of that person or the specialness of that relationship you may have had. What you're doing is countering ignorance. Ultimately we cry, we suffer, we're upset when we lose someone. All those emotions and the experience of grief is coming from a place of not accepting the truth, not understanding the truth, or the Buddha's word is avijja, ignorance. All our craving and attachment in this life comes from ignorance, not seeing the truth, not knowing the truth. It's the deepest, hardest thing to uproot and change from our experience. Only the arahant has finally given up ignorance. So they said in the time of the Buddha, everybody loved the Buddha. All his students, monks, nuns, laymen, laywomen, of course, they loved the Buddha, had the great faith in the Buddha. When the Buddha passed away, many of them cried. And they say at that time you could tell who was an arahant because they were able to not, they didn't cry because their mind is completely in line with the truth. They know life is impermanent, whoever's born must die, even the Buddha must die. There's no more ignorance, that's been removed from the mind, no more delusions, wrong views, false expectations, false hopes. Their minds were completely in line with the truth. But even say a sotapanna, a stream enterer, somebody who's attained the first level of enlightenment, they may, when the Buddha passed away, they may have shed tears. Or even when their loved ones pass away, they may have shed tears, because even though they had already a certain insight into impermanence, that emotional attachment for a teacher or a parent or a loved one is so deep into the mind that even a sotapanna may still shed tears and feel strong emotion at the time of death. So it's only the arahant who's completely removed ignorance. But those arahants all came from people like you and me, from us, and they came to that realization through practice. And this is why the Buddha encouraged us to practice every day, long before the suffering of grief and loss and separation comes up. You're already practicing. That's the aim of the Buddhist teachings. As soon as you hear these teachings, start bringing them into your heart and use them to your own advantage to help bring your mind in line with the truth. Or for those who are obsessed with the Buddha as a physical form, and the Buddha as a person, the Buddha's body, like the monk, was it Wakali, and there's others who just obsessed with always being able to see the Buddha, how beautiful the Buddha's skin was, all the features, we call the features of a great being, the beautiful eyes, the beautiful skin, the radiance, the nice hair, everything. There were some people who were totally obsessed with the physical Buddha. So the Buddha had to keep reminding them and teaching them, one who sees the Dhamma sees the Buddha. The real Buddha is the Dhamma, seeing the truth, say the truth of impermanence, not the physical Buddha. The physical Buddha ultimately is just a collection of the four elements. And those elements we don't even own. We say we borrow them from the world. Earth, air, fire, and water. And we have a great debt of gratitude to our parents who bring us into the world and give us life. But what is life? It's really just borrowing the four elements from this world. We eat food, we drink, we can survive, we breathe air. We survive on getting reasonable conditions for living, heat and cold at a reasonable temperature, living at a reasonable temperature. But we're just borrowing the physical elements that make up this body. And that even applies to the Buddha. The Buddha said, the Buddha is not the body of the Buddha. That's a human body made up of the four elements, which are destined to get old, sick and die, break apart. They will not last forever. So the Buddha encouraged his own students to see the Dhamma, bring their minds in line with Dhamma, to understand that separation, loss, aging, sickness and death are just normal. To remove ignorance and attachment from their minds. And so often with our loved ones, one of the reasons we have grief is because we see the loved one aging, maybe getting sick. The most common forms of death in the world are from, say, heart disease or cancer or similar serious illnesses. And often there's preceded by a period of time where the loved one is ill, maybe in hospital, maybe at home, getting treatment, whatever. And so often we're just identifying that person in our minds with the perception of their body as a self. So we see the body fading through age, through illness, and we suffer with that. But when you're practicing the Dhamma, bringing your mind in line with the Dhamma, and particularly if you're practicing meditation and reflecting on these things, you're going deeper than that. You're going beyond the physical form of your mother or father or your son, daughter, friend that you may see on a hospital bed or at home in bed, or even in a coffin if they've already passed away. You're bringing your mind to see the Dhamma of the experience, the truth of the experience. And the truth of the experience is that the person is not the body. That person is the good that that person has done through their life, even a very short life. The joys that they've experienced, the joys we've experienced with them, the good karma they've made, the good things they've done for us, for other people, for themselves, the good qualities that they embodied and developed, the things they said, the things they did. That's the person, rather than the physical body. And this, again, is another reason the Buddha was encouraging us to keep investigating our attachment, our identification with our physical body, to see that it's not a self, it's a collection of elements that we borrow from the world. We don't even own them. And the people we love are the same. The people we love are made up of a collection of physical elements, which they also have to let go of, just as we have to let go of. And that brings you to the mind, doesn't it? The mind is something that lies behind or deeper than the body. What is it you're learning with in meditation is to focus more on the mind and see the mind. You investigate the body, of course, but that's in order also to let go of the body, because once you see it, it's not self, then your mind steps back a bit, experiences more detachment. Then you're looking more at the qualities of the mind, the good and the bad, say unwholesome, unskillful qualities are to be abandoned, let go of. The skillful qualities are to be cultivated and developed. So when you come to look at the people you love, this is the way the Buddha was encouraging us to develop ourselves, go deeper than just looking at the physical form and the loss when death comes, that person is old or sick and they die. Go beyond just the loss of the physical body, but to look beyond it and see all the good qualities of that person. They're still there. Nothing removes them. Death doesn't remove them. The good karma that person has developed is still there. So as we start reflecting on this, then the mind moves away from just the sort of paralysis of grief towards the qualities of gratitude, appreciation, even happiness. Strangely enough, if you reflect correctly on someone's life, you don't want the loss, you don't want their life to end. But when you're reflecting correctly, you can even develop happiness and joy that you knew them. Remembering that, the things they've said and done, that you've witnessed, things you've heard about them, things you know about them, maybe from other people as well. And that's why when someone does die, we have eulogies and we talk about them and celebrate, we say celebrate their life. Well, that's not a bad idea, because you're remembering the good of that person, going beyond the loss of the physical body, but you're recollecting the good qualities of that person and bringing some of that into your heart, and in that way they kind of live on, don't they? When you think of the Buddha died 2,500 years ago, and yet we're still practicing what he taught. We still recollect the Buddha. We can be very happy remembering the Buddha, even though he's gone. And we can do it in exactly the same way with the people we know and love, who we've lived with, who may be experiencing grief when we've lost them. The thing to do is to turn to recollect the good qualities of those people, the good things we can remember. And then to go on, to practice to do more good for ourselves. And also we can dedicate that back to those people, following their example. Particularly if it was, say, a parent or a teacher or somebody who had a great meaning in your life, There'll be many things you can emulate, copy, follow their good example, remember some of their words of advice, and so on. Things you can remember, you can continue the good work of their life, you might say. Even thinking about it, even a little baby, unfortunately they die, and they do every day through miscarriage or infection, things go wrong. Even a little baby, you can recollect the goodness of that little baby who's passed away, because they wouldn't have achieved a human birth for however short a period of time without having made some good karma in the past. And that's something to be joyful about. Of course, the loss is there, and we can't deny that, but the joy just of knowing a human being, even for a short period of time, when we recollect the good qualities, like the Buddha said, what brings someone to human birth is particularly having developed the qualities of a manusa, a human in the past, particularly the 5 precepts. So any baby, even if unfortunately they die young, they must have been practicing developing the 5 precepts in the past, have some sense of good and bad karma, restraining from killing others, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, getting intoxicated with drink and drugs. They must have practiced that in the past. And of course, anyone we know who's lived a longer life, a fuller life, they'll have many, many good things they've done through their life that we can recollect and turn to at the time when they die, to counter the experience of grief, loss, the sadness, the anguish, and so on. So the Buddha said, meditate on this every day, the fact that our life is impermanent, our time is limited, so we have to get on and do more good. And then the people we love, their time is limited. They're not going to be here forever. It's another great motivation to let go of, we say, let bygones be bygones. Let go of resentments, anguish, hatred for people. And often the people we love, it comes as a package, doesn't it? You attach to someone, well, that will bring with it both the good times and the bad times, the loves and the hates. Or sometimes it's somebody more distant from you who's somehow hurt you, and you've built up resentment towards them. But recollecting the impermanence of life, even to the people you don't like, people you might consider enemies, or people who have harmed you, the appropriate thing when you recollect impermanence and the impermanence of life, the appropriate thing to do is let go, isn't it? Let go of that anger, because that anger is still an attachment. They may be a karmic sparring partner through one way or another, through work or on a social level or in the family. And in a way, they're sort of, you're attached, don't you? Through anger and hatred, you're still attached to someone. They're still going to die, you're still going to die. So recollecting impermanence is another motivation to give up the anger. Forgive them, let it go, so that you can die peacefully, they can die peacefully, and then maybe focus on the good of those people. Everyone has got some good in them somewhere. When we're angry, we don't see it very easily, do we? We tend to just focus on what's wrong with them, make our own mind miserable, and maybe it's a very destructive force, anger. Maybe it leads us to say and do things to hurt that person as well. At least we think negative thoughts towards them. But when we reflect on impermanence, the end of life, and do you want to die with that kind of mental state and in your mind? Do you still want anguish coming up, bothering you when you die? Or would you rather think of that person with forgiveness and even remembering some of the good they did? They may not have done much good with you, but they may have done good with other people in their life. It's a much better way to be, isn't it? When you focus on the good of others, you feel happier, you feel more at ease. When you just remember with resentment, what they did wrong, what you didn't like about them, you're miserable. So even grief, the loss of somebody, can bring up these kind of thoughts about that person. Who were they? What did I like about that person? What did I hate about that person? But what you're also reflecting on is the fact that life is impermanent. So the Buddha's message may be, don't wait to be on your deathbed to contemplate this. Start now. Develop the antidote to grief and suffering by recollecting impermanence and opening up your mind with mindfulness and cultivating wise reflection every day, because the world is teaching us, everything is teaching us. Life is impermanent. The people we love and like, one day we will separate, but the goodness of those people we don't separate from, can live on. And we say, Ajahn Chah lives on through his Sangha. Those people who knew him, lived with him, practiced with him, they've got a little bit of Ajahn Chah, whatever they can recollect of his teachings and his words and the way he practiced and lived as well. There's a little bit of that lives on in his Sangha, in the monasteries that have started around Thailand and around the world. There's a little bit of Ajahn Chah there, isn't there? That's not the physical form of Ajahn Chah, that's long gone. We have the relics now in the Chedi, the stupa, Ajahn Chah's monastery. But the goodness of Ajahn Chah is always there for us to tap into. We can recollect his teachings, we can recollect the goodness of his life, the sacrifice for his own practice and then for teaching others, the good energy. It's all there available to us still. There's something left. That's deeper than just the physical form. So it's sad when a great teacher dies, just as when our parents die, say, but there's something left. It's not the end of the story. Maybe what's left is the most important thing, the wisdom, the compassion, the good qualities of that person. So I often quote when Ajahn Chah did die, the very first day he died, Ajahn Mahabodh got in a car and drove to Wat Pah Pong and came to give support to the Sangha because he knew how they'd be feeling. And he gave a talk. He arrived and he sat down and gave a Dhamma talk saying, I know how you feel. You've just lost your teacher. And Ajahn Chah is like an amazing presence, charismatic, wise, compassionate, peaceful presence that everyone has benefited from. He said, I know how you feel. I felt exactly the same when I lost Luang Por Man, my teacher. So he was there out of compassion and to support the Sangha. And then we took him across to where he's going to stay. And I had the job of attending on him, looking after him. And when everyone had cleared away, I was just helping to unpack his things. And he just pulled me to the side and he said, look, your teacher has died. Don't become one of those monks who just hangs around the stupa, sweeping, moping, feeling sorry for yourself, just dusting the relics of the master. So don't be like that. You have to go off and practice twice as much as before, do more good than before, meditate twice as many hours as before, do more good than before. Because your teacher has died, that's what you have to do. That's how you should respond. Don't just mope with your sadness, your grief. That's the teaching of the Dhamma, isn't it? The Buddha didn't encourage people to get stuck. Of course, we will have feelings that paralyze us, shock us, traumatize us. We feel deeply sorry. Of course, those will come up. But that's the challenge, is to rise above them through the practice, to go on and do more good. As if the Buddha was saying, look, okay, you've lost this person that you love, but how are you going to be now? Are you just going to stick there with your sadness, your grief, or are you going to go on and do more good for them and for you? Or it could be Ajahn Chah or Ajahn Mahabodh, or could be your own mind. When you're mindful enough, the Dhamma will come up in your own mind, and your own mind will say, this is no good, just sitting around depressed, unhappy because I've lost this person. Now I have to carry on practicing for them and for myself. That you would say that is the Buddhist response to death, is to do more good, even more good than before. You feel depressed, but you get up and you do more. You do more, put more effort into practice of generosity. We make donations and help other people, practice kindness, we practice compassion. We keep the precepts even more strictly than before, with more effort than before, more mindfulness than before. We put our effort into listening to the Dhamma, learning the Dhamma, meditating more than before. Because if someone you love has died, they're telling you something, aren't they? They're saying, look, life is short. Don't waste your time. And you can tell that before you die. You tell that to your loved ones. You say, look, when I die, just tell them, when I die, don't sit around crying. Don't sit around just, wiping the photograph of me or dusting or crying or whatever. Go and do twice as much good as before. You give them those instructions before you die. That will help the world, to your kids, your friends. And if we're all doing that to each other, then we'll be arousing good energy and the kind of qualities that will help us get through these natural experiences of grief, loss, suffering. They give us the patience to go through our own emotions and let them go. Give us the energy to pick ourselves up after a bad experience. Loss is obviously a bad experience, but we have to pick ourselves up. If we all encourage each other in this way, even before we've died, we're telling each other what to do, how to behave, then that's going to help everyone, isn't it? This is the value of Dhamma. More than the physical Buddha, the real value of Buddhism or the Buddhist teachings is the Dhamma that we share. And that one who sees the Dhamma sees the Buddha. One who sees the understanding that all things are impermanent. One who sees that, they're freeing their mind from ignorance, delusion, craving, attachment. This is the way to true happiness. At first, it seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? It seems incorrect. Letting go, if someone you love has died, letting go, that seems wrong. It seems like being dishonorable, disrespectful to the person, not caring. But it's not correct, is it? You're letting go to honor them. You're letting go of the ignorance that causes this suffering, the anguish, the despair of loss. You're letting that go, and you're cultivating more skillful qualities of mind. Mindfulness, wisdom, gratitude, appreciation, compassion, all the good qualities come up when you let go of the negative ones. That changeover from grief into compassion, gratitude, that may take time, take effort, take patient effort, of course, but that's the way to go, isn't it? That's how to deal with grief. Many, many people have actually found, in a strange way or surprising way, that the death of a loved one is often a stimulus to do more good in their life. It's often a turning point. Great suffering can be the cause for great effort, wisdom, good qualities of mind to arise, because it wakes us up, sobers us up. When you lose someone you love, suddenly you're seeing the truth, aren't you? So often it's the stimulus to do more good in the world. When things are going well, everything is comfortable, we've got what we want, everyone around us, the people we love are there. We get a bit lazy, don't we? We get complacent. We take things for granted. We take people for granted. And we put off doing good. And often we're indulging more. So actually, without realizing it, we're feeding our ignorance, our attachment, which will only catch up with us later. And we'll suffer more later. So although nobody wants loss or grief or suffering in that way, it can be the prompt, the cause for good things to come in the long run as we practice more from it. So maybe I'll leave you with these reflections tonight, and in a moment we can see if there's any questions.
Handamayan Dhammakataya Sadhukarang Dadamase Sadhu Sadhu Sadhu